Hey everyone, welcome back to Forward United. I am James Ellers, and with me today we have Meghin and Kateri of the Yang Gang Book Club. How y'all doing?
Hi guys.
Hi guys. I'm good.
Pretty good.
Doing great.
Pretty good. 2020 good as you can be.
Yeah. That's gonna be like a meme or something like in the next 10 years.
On a scale of 1 to 2020, how much does your life suck?
Yeah.
And we're only halfway through it.
Not even.
No.
When does the tarot card reading start?
10 minutes.
I actually have those. So.
Do you? All right. Well, we might have to bust those out at the end because.
No, I've been too scared to read my cards, to be honest.
Well, you could read my cards because, nothing worse can happen. So the reason we wanted to jump on and have a discussion is something we've discussed in the past, in passing, that I wanted to talk more about, and that is something that I think Kateri coined it, UBI Renaissance. So
did I?
Yeah, I'm going to give you credit for it. It's all good. Okay. The idea behind it, I think, is just taking, everything that's happening right now, everything that's going on, and seeing how we can make positive outcomes and positive solutions out of everything that's happening right now. So, of course, UBI Renaissance, I think, is tied to the idea that once you implement a universal basic income, you're not paying people to do nothing, you're paying people to do anything. Right. And the idea behind that, where people won't be tied to jobs and tasks and everything that are repetitive and pointless, and people can actually work on their passions. Right. Mm-hmm. Is that a decent interpretation of what you're thinking for it? Both of you, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, it also came from, so with being, both of us were have degrees in English, and part of with English you kind of learn the history of the Renaissance and things. And I think the reason we coined that, I think it was Kateri and Paul. I think Paul was in that conversation too. We were saying how after the plague happened, that's when the Renaissance kind of came about, right? I think is when we were talking about that, and there was this huge kind of rebirth of the arts, and so we were just kind of talking about how with the pandemic, kind of if UBI were to come from this, the new Renaissance that would happen from that.
Yeah. I think you kind of just covered it really. Once we all have the capability to be able to pursue our passions, it's gonna change everything, not just about, I think, art and the content we create, which is where our mind goes towards first, but it's going to change our architecture and, our public places. It's going to change even, I think, the way we relate to each other. That might take some time, but we already talked about this with UBI, I feel, you meet someone, you say, oh, what do you do? And you say that with the notion that it's going to be some sort of title. And maybe that changes to what do you like to do or something, who knows, that might change. It probably would take a while. It's also just a cultural generational thing. But yeah, that's kind of where my mind was at. And it's just so fun, I think, to just sit and try to imagine what that would look like.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where our identities are so tied to work right now that it needs to disconnect from that. I don't know. I don't feel like we should be identified by what kind of labor we perform. You know what I mean? If you look at it like that, and it's something where I forget where I read this statistic, but I read something where Americans, specifically American workers, are the most productive workers in the world. So not only do we love work, we're doing it more than anyone else in the world. And we're just I don't know, especially in 2020, where a lot of work, because when we had previous discussions, it was before, what's the number up to right now? 30 or 40 million people lost their job, something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was before that happened. It was before all these small businesses got eaten up by, what's going on with COVID. So I feel like everything we've discussed before is so much more relevant now because there's going to be so many people just out of work. And again, a lot of people, their identities are tied to their work. So I feel like, again, this is just me rambling. I feel like we need to implement solutions before it keeps getting worse. You know what I mean? Because like the emergency unemployment runs out next month and all these different things are going to start running out, which if there's not solutions implemented quickly, August and September are going to be kind of crazy. I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, BuzzFeed just wrote like the most terrifying article I've ever read in my life about how August is going to suck and the economy basically is going to like tank. And the picture is literally, it says, "This is the end," written in like red spray paint. And it's like, it's terrifying. I think Maria also shared it, but it's like, yeah, it's slightly terrifying. But also like going back to what, we were saying about our identity being in our jobs. I mean, I've kind of felt that even with the past, I think, year and a half that I've been more of a student. And I've always worked since I was like 16 and old enough to actually like get a job somewhere. I've always worked. And so I know for me, it's almost embarrassing to tell someone you don't work because we're so wrapped up in like your work being your identity that it's almost like I have to say, even though I haven't been in school necessarily because I've been applying to school, I still say, oh, I'm a student, because I just feel this need to be like, well, I promise I'm going to be working. I will be working. I will be part of the workforce again soon. But during this time, I mean, I've been like not having to focus on, work, which what I'm going into is something I'm going to enjoy, but it's not having that like drain, like mentally, emotionally, physically. I've been able to like write, like I've told Kateri, like I have written more within the past like 2 months than I have in the past like 5 years. And writing was how I used to identify as a writer, but you get so caught up in being something else that's more valuable, to society, that you kind of forget those parts of yourself. And then you start doing it again and you're like, oh, I'm actually like kind of good at this and like passionate about this. And I forgot about this part of myself. So that's something that's kind of cool about, the whole, if, UBI does become a reality, that's a really cool part where, people can find those parts of themselves again that have kind of just been like hidden.
Yeah, that reminds me of another thing that I had thought about in terms of like that kind of phrase, UBI Renaissance, because I've had this conversation with multiple people who consider themselves, in my case, usually writers, just kind of about what it means to be a writer in today's society. And it's like part of the reason I make the stance I make is because I've always considered myself a writer, but for various reasons, I have not been a writer. I have not written. And so there's just kind of this notion of like, well, first of all, like if you write, you're a writer, and I do believe that. But I actually almost take it a step further because I feel like we have this sort of almost this artistic crisis actually right now. And my boyfriend's a musician, and we both see the world very similarly, but from different artistic perspectives, where he sees it from music and how terrible music education is now. And so we talk about this a lot. And so I kind of just function under the idea that there are so many musicians out there, there are so many writers out there that don't know that they are, or you hear people say like, oh, like, I always wanted to write this book. And I feel like the tendency, and this is what I was saying earlier about some other writers who like do write, to be judgmental about those people and say, you know, like, well, you're not a real writer, you know, or, you know, you're lazy, or like you have to, like the amount of times I've been told, like, well, you need to wake up at 4 a.m. and write for an hour and then go to work for 9 hours and then come home and like still try to like have a social life. And I'm just like, that's a problem. You know, like, can we not just like trick ourselves into this notion that like we should be expecting everyone to be able to do that? And there are probably so many amazing writers out there. And I'm like that. Like I need my sleep. I'm not a night person. Like, you know, like I can't stay up late writing, and then, you know, I can't really even get up early and write either. So that's just kind of my thing, is where I think that we have like this dearth, we have this untapped potential in our society. So that kind of like what Meghin was saying, like where I honestly relate to that so much as well, even though I've been published and I have written some stuff, and I've written a lot of stuff that hasn't gotten published, but I've like completed stuff, you know, like some of the markers of what a writer is kind of as defined by like, you know, that community. But I still like sometimes I still struggle with that guilt, and I still, you know, but I'm just like, oh yeah, I also have like 5 jobs.
Yeah.
You know, so like no wonder.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the way society kind of wants you to, you know, have multiple jobs, and then if you want to be creative, do it on the side. Like, don't let it interrupt your labor. You know what I mean? And I feel like you said that there is a artistic crisis. And I would say, honestly, like, that's absolutely right. And even it's getting to the point where there's just a creativity crisis, even going a little further also, like almost to the point where there's a free thinking crisis where, you know what I mean? Like there's so much, it's going the wrong way so quickly. It's like, okay, how do we put the brakes on kind of the direction everything's going and turn it the other way? And I don't know, again, this is why I want to have the discussion, because again, I don't have all the answers. I don't try to pretend like I have all the answers. And with this, is it something where we need to start changing the mindset before UBI gets implemented, or is it something where UBI gets implemented? I think UBI getting implemented would start changing the mindset, but I don't know. I feel like it would be easier to get implemented if we also started to try to change the mindset. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And this is something Kateri and I talk about pretty often, I feel like, is how the education system too also just like doesn't really value the arts. You know, I was left, not really.
Or creative thinking.
Yeah, creative thinking, you know, it's very, for example, take like,
Bless you.
take like, oh my. Take like, okay, I'll just give an example, like my high school English class. One of them was like, it's very rigid, right? And if you, and the thing is, there is like that part of like, you do have to like learn the rules before you can break them. With like, I'm just taking English as the example because that's my field, but you know, you kind of do, there are the rules that you need to learn in order to kind of like break those rules. But so much of like, from what I remember in high school is just the rules. And then it wasn't until I think probably my senior year that we had like an actual like creative writing class. And that was the first time I had really been allowed to like just go for it, you know, and like, right, you know, she would just give us a topic and we would write whatever we wanted to. And, you know, that's the kind of class that I would love people to have, you know, like a teacher who is more so like, oh, as long as you spell everything right, I'm not really concerned with your grammar. I just want you to write and I want you to be creative. And I don't want you to worry about failing my class because you tried to write a story, you know. And like, there were so many people from that class who like, you know, to Kateri's point, when you're allowed to have that creative thinking and kind of relax, you find out things about yourself. And there were so many people in that class that didn't consider themselves writers before that class. But afterwards, they continued to write. And not just writing, they kind of were like, oh, if writing's great, I want to read too. I want to read what other people have written. I want to read more books. And then I want to write stories about those books, you know. And so that, from the English standpoint, I think there's a lot more constraint. There's a lot of constraints that I just feel like we need to kind of take that mindset and be more creative with it. And I know Kateri also has thoughts about this.
Like making a mental list in my head.
Yeah, I
just give me 10 minutes and then one of the main things that just you made me think about was I've taken like a few creative writing classes all through school, and just made me think about how in every class there is always at least one, usually more, people who just like thoroughly surprise me, which is like, that's obviously based on what judgments that I make in a human way, like we all make judgments, and like there's just always a time when every time I take a class, like someone shares something that just blows me away, and I go into these classes thinking like, I'm a writer, like I know what I'm doing, and then I read someone's work and I'm like, shit, like this is good, like I'm like, damn, like and like, so it's just like, it kind of, I feel like that kind of proves my point, like and then the other thing is like I have actually taught creative writing. Once I had a creative writing like private student. It was actually one of my boyfriend's students, but he was struggling in English literature, and his mom was like really fun, creative person, and she found out that I was a writer, and so she was like, would you actually give him English lessons, but like creative writing English lessons? And I was like, yes. And I was like, I bet you that actually we could get a lot done. And so we I went through the motions of like, hey, write poems, write a short story. Okay, let's write a novel. And it was going okay. He was mostly into it. But then I got to the point where I was like, I don't even know what to do anymore. So I was like, you know what, just write a list of like things that you like your interests. And it's funny because the first list he wrote was like video games, recess, like these kind of vague and then kind of silly things. And I wrote a list that it was like more specific. I had like dinosaurs and like outer space on it. Like I made it as like fun and diverse as I could. And I was like, do you see the difference between my list and your list? And he's like, yeah, I do. And so I was like, okay, write a new one. And then he wrote this list of like all of these like random, like specific, like there was like this like thing that meant like the study of blood, and then like, ancient Egyptians. And so like he had this list of like things that he liked. And I was like, okay, we're just going to take this list and write about this, like different topics on this list. Like, we're not going to say what it's going to be. We're just going to write about it and see what comes out of it. And that's when it took off. And so it's like, even for me, like going into that situation thinking I knew what I was doing, I didn't get it right until I realized that I just needed to like step back and like let him kind of drive the ship, steer the ship, however you handle the ship.
However that works.
Pilot, steer, I don't really know actually.
Yeah. Pilot an airplane. I know about that.
I don't know.
Anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I already forget if that actually relates to what you were saying, Megan, but I did have those thoughts while you were talking. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but yeah, this is a topic we've clearly thought a lot about.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's super relevant. I feel like classes are built to mold people into good workers.
Yeah.
Right.
If that makes sense.
To produce.
Yes.
To have an end result, to have a product.
Yes, and it kind of depends too. Like they're teaching you to have a very I think something I've learned, within the past few years, and especially, with everything going on with Black Lives Matter and all of a sudden everyone finding out all of this history, I think a lot of our education is, yes, they're teaching you how to be workers and how to produce, but then they're also like not teaching you like really important things. And it's kind of like, well, if they're not teaching us this like huge chunks of like history, like what else are they not teaching us? You know what I mean? Like it's like they're teaching us to all be the same person, and that, that person is like, and we're all different people, and does that make sense? As I was saying it, I was like,
No, it makes complete sense. I mean, specifically with what's going on with Black Lives Matter, I think one of the big ones is the Tulsa Black Wall Street that was, that was massacred pretty much. And that's not something they teach in history for whatever reason. You know what I mean? Like, that's a pretty big thing. And yeah, it's just something where it's like, okay, we need to get past the overarching thing is, with technology, we don't need people working these crazy long hours, these crazy jobs to be able to produce more than we've ever produced before. Yeah. So why don't we just get off this whole train of, hey, we have to be as productive as possible, to be able to whatever,
matter.
What I mean? Like, I know, to be relevant. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And let's actually let people be a little creative. And to your point, so in my life, again, a reason I like to talk to you guys about this stuff is just because I've had to work pretty much my whole life too. And I haven't really ever been able to flex kind of those creative muscles, which is, so again, I'm not super comfortable with it. And again, that's what pretty much everything Andrew Yang talked about, what's wrong with the younger generations and what's happening, all those have happened to me. So that's why I identify it so well. One example of what Kateri was saying, where you have people that are finally able to kind of flex these or muscles or just try being creative, whatever, people will surprise themselves. In high school, I just took all the normal classes. My senior year came around. They're like, you have to take an elective. I was like, I don't know, whatever's open. They're like, art's open. I'm like, shit, I've never done art, but sure. So I got into it, and this is what I grabbed when I was off screen. I was like, oh, I actually kind of like this. So I was going to show you just an example of people that aren't really good, don't really think. And this is one of the things I drew. There's a giant Arnold picture. Yeah.
Get out of town.
And the people on audio, you could go to YouTube and see the picture. But I was just saying that's an example of, and I, you know what I mean? I haven't really been able to do similar things.
I just got the chills.
I know. I'm not going to lie. I was like, oh, we're going to have to be like, oh, yeah, that's so good. But I was like, no, that's really good.
Well, no, I mean, I'm very self-critical. So, I mean, I know it's okay.
Yeah. For the people on audio,
you did that.
My jaw dropped. Literally, my jaw dropped.
You did that without any formal training, right?
Right. I mean, I was a senior in high school.
You figured it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they taught us systems and things like that. But I mean, it speaks to your point where we don't know who and what in the world, how many people in the world have all these talents and stuff, but they're just not able to use them because the current system's built out that limits creativity and free thinking and everything that we greatly need right now. And we're all kind of pushed in these separate boxes that we're getting to the point where everybody being pushed in these boxes is actually being super destructive right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is.
That's where I'm at. And I'm I don't know, again, I don't have the answers. I can identify problems fairly well in terms of what the solutions are is one of the things, a lot of the things we need to figure out, how do we get people out of these boxes? And I feel again, UBI universal basic income isn't the cure-all for everything, but it makes a lot of these problems easier to solve.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of it too, a lot of with UBI comes, technology and AI and all of that. And I think some people are kind of oh, that's not good. We need to delay that because we need to work and we need to work. And the thing is it's technology and AI it doesn't have to be a bad thing, and that's something that, the book club's getting into this month. But technology and stuff, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if then we have, this situation that we have right now with, 30 or 40 million people out of work times however, because now all the other jobs are taken up by technology too, and it's kind of it's not a bad thing, but it is a bad thing if then nobody is surviving because they don't have any income. And then in turn, they can't, put food on their table and they can't put a roof over their head. And, just to put a little plug in, we're reading Tyranny of Kindness for the book club this month. And, you know, people are like, oh, well, you can be on unemployment. You can get welfare benefits. No. The process is like, it's dumb. Like, I don't know. Like, and the thing is like, she wrote this book, like, how old am I? 26 years ago. She wrote this like 26 years ago. It came out in 1993. And yes, there are like new programs, but it's not any easier, you know?
Right.
And so it's like, you know, people are like, oh, well, you can get on welfare, but then you get on welfare and people are like, oh, you're on welfare. You're lazy, you know? And it's like, I don't know. It's just a lot of like stigmas. And, you know, like you were saying, like you were asking, you know, does UBI come first or does changing society's mindset comes first? And I think it's got to kind of be like in tandem almost. I think before we might have had time to change society's mind first,
Right.
but now I think it has to be simultaneous. It has to be, this is how it is, and this is like a dire situation. A lot of these jobs aren't coming back. And we need to kind of get out of that mindset now while also trying to pass UBI, you know? So I think it's kind of come to the point where it definitely has to be like a simultaneous change.
Right. Yeah, and I think like to that point of like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? UBI or the systems. I mean, like you know, we've already talked about like within the Yang Gang community, you know, and Andrew Yang talks about like UBI doesn't fix everything. But yeah, like you really just kind of got my wheels turning. Like we just get UBI implemented, you know, July 2020. You're going to have a lot of people who still are like, I don't know how to be creative. And I talk about creativity as a skill. Like for that example I gave where I had that student and I like kind of taught him a lesson there of like how challenge your mind to think deeper. And all he was thinking about was stuff he likes, which should be easy, you know, but those kind of things can be taught. And really like those things can be taught, or the foundation can be laid in like pre-K. Like I just think, I think absolutely a lot of it, UBI is going to be part of it, but it might not actually even be the thing. Like really what it might be is the education reform that, you know, because it's like, yeah, you have a society with more potential, but you know, it's not like, I feel like I'm just being realistic if I say, you know, like a lot of that money is going to be spent on things that are good, but not necessarily getting a huge percent of the population to be artists and creative thinkers and stuff like that. Cause it's like that foundation for them wasn't laid. Like I was just kind of thinking how like, it's like kind of scary. Like I think some damage has just already been done with the lack of education there. And so, yeah, especially and thinking of people who come from really underserved communities, especially, that's going to be rough. Like it's going to take some time before they can, you know, get some of those opportunities.
I feel like it's almost to the point where it might be easier creating outside education systems that you can then prove, and then the institutions will be like, oh, okay, it worked, versus going in and trying to change the minds of all these, you know, it's been attempted for how long? You know what I mean? Like the book you're reading, like all these systems that are just crumbling. It's just like, they don't want to change. So it's almost like you just have to build a better system, and then either they adopt it or they just, you know, fade away and the better system takes over.
Yeah.
The system is not like set in place to like think outside the box.
No, and it's not encouraged. It's not encouraged at all. You know, because a free thinker, you know, someone who's more creative minded, they're more able and willing to defy what the people in charge are saying, and they might have better solutions. And the people at the top, they like being in charge. They like the power, right? They like being the one to give the rules.
Status quo.
Yes, exactly. The status quo helps them the most. And I can say just that the jobs I've been at, even the ones that might have been more creative, I was a daycare teacher. And still, like, teachers where you're supposed to be creative, you are so micromanaged. Like, Kateri, you teach, you're so micromanaged to the point where the creativity is taken out of it. Another job that I had so many ideas, and I wasn't allowed to really implement them because the people at the top liked the way things were going, even though the way things were going were not good. And I will just say that the place I worked at is no longer in business since I left. And so it's just different doesn't always have to mean bad. And to them, though, it does mean bad because that means that they're not in charge anymore. And for some people, them having control is the best thing in their mind.
Yeah. I mean, term limits right there. What?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Are either of you familiar? No, I mean, yeah, I know that would take a whole nother. Are either of you familiar with this Ad Astra Academy from Elon Musk? Because I'm a huge Elon Musk fan. I've never heard of this, so I feel like I'm not doing a good job.
I think I've heard Kurt mention that before, actually. I think he's mentioned this before, but I haven't actually looked
Google
at it.
The Brad Pitt movie is going to come up. Elon Musk.
That's why I've heard it before. I was like, why does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I've specifically heard Kurt mention this before, from Elon Musk. I guess it's said it's a framework.
Elon Musk co-founded a school for his 5 sons in 2014 called Ad Astra. At first, the school only had 8 students and was based in a conference room at SpaceX. It now boasts around 40 students.
Ooh.
An Ars Technica report revealed.
That
doesn't give much into its actual
a STEM kind of
functionality. Which, I mean,
I was about to say,
we really need more STEM.
I was about to be like, I'm about to hit a nerve. We like to call it STEAM.
STEAM, guys. It's STEAM.
I'm not in
Science, technology, engineering, arts.
Okay. I didn't understand the reference. I was like, what?
No, we are very big proponents of STEAM. And I will say that's what we're kind of trying to make people think creatively is something we're really trying to do with the book club, right? Mm-hmm. So on Wednesdays, we have Wednesdays We Write. And this isn't just for people to who are necessarily already writers. I'm putting air quotes around that. This is for anyone. That's why we give the prompts, and that's why we help people. I've edited or just even looked over things for people, that haven't really written before, and we've had a lot of people who haven't written before just write, and they surprise themselves. I think, which is really cool. Manny in particular comes to mind. He writes stuff and is genuinely surprised when people like it because he's never been taught to that he can write before, and it's kind of our own pocket of reimagining creativity within our own little part of Twitter, which has been kind of fun.
Yeah, and the book club itself is huge for how long it's been around. I'd say it's pretty damn successful, and again, it's just widening what we're doing to include more people. I mean, and that's the difficult part is the scaling, because what I feel like we do pretty damn well on a smaller scale, it's okay, now how do we get these kind of ideas and everything spread everywhere? Because that's what's so frustrating with UBI is if you've actually dug into it and everything, you would understand how much it would actually help everything going on right now. In addition to just helping people be creative and being fulfilled and happy, you know what I mean? There's so many different things that's just just look at it in depth a little bit and then get back to me. You know what I mean? It's not one of these policies that's needs to be a never-ending argument. Especially right now with everything going on.
Yeah, and creativity, I think, as I'm like thinking back over what we talked about, I think we've even been kind of putting creativity in a box a little bit, not on purpose, just because like we're putting in context of like writing and art. But creativity isn't just writing. It's not just painting a picture. Creativity it encompasses a lot of things. Us doing this podcast right now, this is a form of creativity. It takes a creative mind to be able to have these conversations and to kind of think out of the box. Knitting is kind of like a random one, but that's a creative outlet. I taught myself how to knit, and because I have nervous hands, and that has been like a great creative outlet. Crocheting. There's so many things that people might not necessarily think of as creative, but creativity isn't just one thing.
Yeah, and imagine a society. Go ahead.
I was going to say I think there's creativity in science, and STEM should be STEAM because it actually benefits the ingenuity of the STEM part in a lot of ways.
And that ties into what I was going to say, where imagine a society where creativity is encouraged, and how many problems would be a lot less of problems if we had everybody wanting to problem solve and be creative, and what I mean, it would benefit everyone as a whole. What I mean, I don't see any negative side besides the rich getting a little less rich. You know what I mean, for the benefit of everyone. And even then, their businesses and everything would be more sustainable because their customers would be getting a universal basic income every month that is going to translate to more business every month. I really don't understand any negative discussions about UBI, especially in the context of just creativity, because I feel like it's gotten to the point where, again, the rest in a couple months, if they don't do something, it's going to even get worse. And the solution's not that difficult, I feel like.
Yeah, but it's not difficult. But like I said, it makes it easier for people to think for themselves. And the people who are in office right now don't want that, because if we were, think about, if we were able to think for ourselves, then we would be like, oh, well, then we don't want these people in office anymore, right? And we vote them out, and then there would be new people in, and we get the stuff done that we want to get done. But if they can keep people down, if they can, if you're afraid to put, if you're, afraid of how you're going to put food on your table, you're not worrying about being creative, and you're not worrying about who's in charge of things. You're just worrying about putting food on your table. You're not worrying about who your congressperson is in that moment. Do you know what I mean? And so if they can keep you there, then you're gonna keep them there by just a natural byproduct of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that's occurring more and more with everything going on, especially the protests, is people are just it's clicking for them finally, that everything's built out to kind of maintain the current order, even though it only benefits a very, very few number of people.
Very select few.
Yeah. So my concern is, okay, people are waking up, things are happening. How do we drive this in a direction where it leads to prosperity versus destruction? You know what I mean? Because a lot of what's going on with the protests is super positive, but there's also a lot of things going on that, the things that aren't given a purpose are slowing down. And you know what I mean? I want the momentum to keep going so that we can continue to make these changes, and especially for the Black Lives Matter movement, because talk about in an era where economics and everything is hard on everyone, to have racism on top of that, you can't expect people to live like that. So I really want to figure out how we can keep pushing in a positive direction, keep getting these changes, because otherwise there's just going to be more riots every few years, just because things aren't going the direction they should, if any of that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the Renaissance thing is something where I think we need to have more discussions around it. Just having it repeat in people's mind, like, hey,
Yeah.
there's actually a fairly clear way that we can make improvements with most people's lives, allow people to be creative and allow people to do what they want. Like, one thing that someone told me once is, I'm like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Like, I'm 31, still saying when I grow up. And they're just like, if you didn't have to work for money, what would you do? I don't even know still. But that's something that we need to challenge people to think about, and then allow them to be able to do. Like, if you didn't have to work for money, like if you didn't have to live your life just trying to make ends meet and do all these things, what would you do? Because I would think a lot of people would just be like, I don't know. I haven't even thought about that. I haven't had the freedom of mind to even entertain that. So that's where I want to get people to go, have more freedom, because right now it's pretty limited.
One of the reasons I love I went to 2 community colleges. Also love the show Community. I recently started watching. One of the reasons I loved community college was how many people were going back to school. To meet those people, and they I had so many more productive conversations in community college than I did when I went to the 4-year university, where people, actually I was a little older. I took longer to get my BA. And I was dancing and working and stuff. So I was even a little bit older than some of the majority of the students when I was at the 4-year university. I had so many more meaningful conversations in City College. I thought, because there were so many more people who were actually going back to school because they knew what they wanted to do for whatever reason, that had taken them until their 30s or 40s to figure it out. And I think that that's actually there's probably, if you somehow did the math, which actually that'd be doable. I think that would be doable. You just have to see the ages of people in community colleges and do some surveys and stuff. And you'd probably be able to see a percentage of people that are in that situation. And I feel like that's got to be growing. I don't think that that's been the norm until more recently.
Yeah, because I feel like there's always been this timeline kind of imposed on us, right? You graduate high school, I guess the average age is 18, and then you graduate college at 21, and then you work. And then you work until, it's supposed to be you work until you're 60.
65. Yeah, 60, 65. Yeah.
And then you live the rest of your, however long or short rest of your life in retirement, and it's in reality, that's not what works. I'm 26, and I'm on my 1, 2, 3. It's my 4th career change. You know what I mean?
That's it.
But I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'm counting in my head how many jobs I've had. I've had a lot of jobs, But
the book club is TBD.
Oh yeah, that's TBD. Okay, real talk. If we didn't have to worry about money and we could just work, I would do the book club full time. That's just what I would do. And Kateri said the same thing. That has been probably the most fulfilling thing that I've done so far in my life, because I'm actively helping people be creative, and that helps mental health, and when your mental health is good, sometimes your physical health ends up being better too. But yeah, so real talk, that's what I would do. But yeah, I'm 26. I'm on my 4th career change, and I'm going back for a master's degree. And to be honest with you, I still don't really know what I'm going to do. I was kind of hoping that I would get to school and figure it out, But I think that that's okay. And that's what I tell people all the time, because I think people hit a certain age and they're like, well, I guess this is just what I am now. And it's no, fuck that. No, no. Sorry, I had to drop at least one. I had to drop at least one.
I was waiting for it.
Yeah, no, you don't have to just be one thing anytime, but especially not for the rest of your life. You don't have to just be one thing, and I think that that's a weird thing that we put on people in our society, is that you just have to, by the time you're 21, you have to pick something and stick with it. And it's
for the rest of your life.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how anybody else's attention span works, but that's not how mine works.
No, and I honestly think we'd have a healthier generational society if that was the norm, that you know, work on something. I mean, there are gonna be people who like my boyfriend like found out that he wanted to be a musician at a young age, and I found out that I wanted to be a writer at a young age. It happened to be that I have other passions too. But, you know, like there's gonna be people like him who like just fall in love with something and they just see it through and that's their life's calling. But I think that there's going to be a lot of people who like in this new age, this is going to be allowed, possible, I should say, that people will like regroup and try something else. And I think it's so good for you. I think it's really good for your mind. I think it keeps you young to like start over again at, you know, 43 and say, I'm going to take on this new challenge and apply the things I've learned up until this point to this new thing. And it's going to make for such a more interesting society, you know, a bunch of people on this planet. Yeah. Oh, I had one more comment. Oh, go ahead with the.
Well, no. Someone, Benjamin commented, I think it is unique to the U.S. Other cultures don't immediately ask you about your career like we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Did I lose it? Oh, no, I didn't. I kind of forget exactly what you were saying that made me think of it. But kind of just, I think you said something of like, I'm going to go to college to figure it out, you know, figure out what I want to do. And I feel like that used to be the norm. Even Andrew Yang talks about it in The War of Normal People, how these universities, especially these like really revered universities, these Ivy League schools, like used to be these places of free thinking and growth. And, you know, it was like, go there to find yourself and find like, where do you fit into society and like, what can you really contribute? But it was like on your terms. And now it's like, okay, go on this track to become a lawyer or a doctor or STEM. Yeah. And like like we still kind of have psychology, but most people get into it because they want to like consult for like corporations, you know, like that's like more, it feels like more of a thing. So yeah, like I think that would be great to have a pushback more towards. I actually have this book right here, like entirely on this subject that someone from Stanford wrote. That's like, it's called A Practical Education. I'm not necessarily recommending you read it. I mean, if it really interests you, but like the basic idea is like learning about the humanities and just learning to learn. Like, how do you know how to learn like on your own, you know, like not just like be spoon-fed information. And that's like, he's arguing that is what the humanity, like you can study anything in the humanities and learn that skill. And STEM companies in general, like they're not even on that wave. Like they don't think about that. And he's making this case of like, we need to value that and like not lose that. And the market needs to value that.
Yeah. People in the humanities have like fantastic like critical thinking skills, like really good critical thinking skills and creative thinking skills, because, you know, you kind of think out of the box and you're like, you know, I think people who tend to be more, I'll just like use my husband as an example because he's a science person. You know, when he's thinking about a problem, he's thinking about like, okay, here's step A, here's step B, here's the, you know, the formula to get there, and you follow that formula. Whereas I'm like, okay, here's step A, here's step B. I think I could go this way, or I could go this way, or you could go this way, or you could go this way. You know what I mean? And so it's like you kind of have like this way of thinking creatively that really, like Kateri was saying, lends its voice to STEM. That's not how I wanted to say it, but it's very helpful to, you know, to the STEM fields, you know, the critical thinking skills and the writing skills. I will say, like, I have written my way into schools and jobs, and you know what I mean? Like, I feel that's something that people don't really value, but I read people's personal statements and I help them edit. And there are some people that I'm like, your English teacher did you so wrong. Like, they did you so wrong. Yeah. You know, you can get your way into, you know, really great opportunities through, you know, writing skills. And I think people don't really realize that.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a niche there. When you were talking about the universities, used to be a place that you go to discover what you want to do, what you want to be. And I think a lot of the reason that it's not like that anywhere is tied to the cost. Like, just get in as fast as possible and get out as fast as possible because you accrue so much debt, which is weird because when you tie it back, and this is, again, these are thoughts I'm just having on the fly. When you tie it around to a lot of what we discussed in UBI movement, whatever you want to call it, education's similar, where we have the technology to do a better job of it at a margin of the cost. So why aren't there universities or colleges or just education platforms that are offering better education for like a very, very, very small cost? Like that's something that might be something to build out, like on all levels, like children, adults, because that seems like it would be an easy way to kind of urge these schools to do similar. Like, hey, we're doing it. We're taking all your students and we're doing a better job for cheaper. Like they would have to compete. That's just.
Yeah.
There should be.
You would think so, right? That's like, why isn't there something like that? Because I feel like it's just like, oh, we could have them take out student loans and get all this money. Screw it. Like, let's do that. You know what I mean? Like, there's not anything I feel like, can you imagine an accredited university or something like that charged? I can't imagine the costs needing to be so high if you did it all online. I don't know. That's a different discussion. But
yeah, I mean, Andrew Yang talks about it.
Who does? Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah.
He talks about some new places because I feel like in that places, institutions like new universities that I didn't know about. I had heard about what's that one? That's really popular.
I'm about to just
Bill Gates' kids. Is
grab the book.
Is it the Great Courses? No, the Great Courses is a newer one. Okay, there's one that Khan Academy.
Yeah, Khan Academy. Oh my gosh, yes, Khan Academy.
Yes, and I had heard of that, but I never tried it. But then he mentions like a couple other that I had never heard of. But his point is like, why are we still like so obsessed with all these universities that have been around for so long and haven't changed? Like, other than to become more corporatized and more expensive and harder and harder and harder to get into. And yet we still like put them on such a high pedestal. I think also, that some of you talk about the cost of entry, but I think also the market, like what the market values, like, like the colleges are valuing STEM because the market values STEM, basically, and corporatism is also enmeshed in both of those sectors. So if we had a UBI that helped us not rely on corporations as much, and also gave more people an opportunity to do their own thing and do it well and have it succeed. Like I'm on this like mission to like decorporatize my spending, especially when it comes to like unnecessary things, unnecessities. Like buying clothes from like smaller independent brands and also like brands owned by Native women and stuff like that. But that's like, there's a privilege that comes along with that, being able to do that. It's, I don't think you can expect our whole society with where it is now to do it. I'm not like, I would never shame someone for, shopping at Target. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something where I feel like we're just starting to break the surface of all the potentials, and it's just like, I don't know, like there's so many things that can be improved with just one of the small solutions. UBI would lead to, just a domino effect in all these other areas. So I don't have all the solutions. Again, the whole goal was to talk about it, and I we're already almost at an hour, and get people's minds working in terms of, what potentials there are with many things, not just like absolutely the arts, but also just creative thinking and also just free thinking. These things that could come from just one small policy implementation, which is pretty crazy if you think about it.
Yeah.
So before we
go ahead. I was just going to say, I think just, when we're talking about solutions, I think that the thing that, if we're going to talk about UBI Renaissance, I think the other thing that we need to like really take on is the education reform and more funding into just overhauling the system. And also I think pre-K, a lot of these things, pre-K gets thought of as being like babysitting. And but if you actually do look into the research there, it's actually like it's so important. So education system, creative thinking, pre-K. I think that's actually really important too.
Yeah, pre-K. I mean, my daughter's 5, so she's pre-K age, which even the pre-K we had her going to was still not up to the level she wants to be learning at. Like, which is crazy. Like, they were doing like finger painting, and she's like, "When do I learn how to spell?" I'm like, and she's like writing stuff out right now. It's crazy, and especially with technology nowadays, like the apps on the iPad, the amount of stuff she learns, is insane. And for the school system to be like, "No, you're not supposed to learn that for like 3 or 4 years," like it just doesn't make sense to me at all. And that's besides the whole creative part, but that was just my rant as a dad of a 5-year-old. Anything else we want to discuss, or any other plugs you want to throw out there for book club or anything else?
I feel like I've plugged it a lot.
That's all good.
Yeah, I haven't. I'll plug it. We haven't like formally announced it. I don't know why, but we have an Instagram page, and Trevor's been working on it. And
Awesome.
and I don't know if he's still here. He was here earlier in the chat. So if you're on Instagram, we're at Yang Gang Book Club, the whole name, not YG Book Club, because it fits on Instagram.
It also confuses people on Twitter.
I know. YG.
YG has a book club?
So YG has a book club? We haven't had that in a little while, but
we haven't.
And then Tyranny. So Tyranny of Kindness by Teresa Funiciello, and we are working with Scott Santins. And so we actually have a lot of reading this month. But if you want to like come prepared to the final meeting, look in the pinned tweet on our page, and it has a thread. First of all, the pinned tweet always says what the book of the month is, and then it has a thread that has all the links. We've posted them, but so there's one place where you can find them. And you'll also find Crisis 2038 by Gerald Huff. We're actually doing a live stream next Saturday with Giselle from Fun for Humanity, which we're really excited about. So
she's like so cool.
She's so cool. We had a talk with her like last month, and we're really excited to talk. She's got a lot to say, so we'll be having like a non-spoiler discussion of that book because there is a lot of reading this month. But it is free on SoundCloud, so if you're actually like,
it is.
It's the link is in the thread.
The chapters go by pretty fast.
Yeah, like that was totally something we could have talked about, or we can talk about in the future, because it's like the exact opposite of this conversation. If you read it, like that is the apocalyptic dystopian future that Andrew Yang projects. It's like to the T. Like it discusses everything he talks about in The War on Normal People, but it presents us as a story and as a living reality. So anyway, so that one's more fun, if you'll say. It's fiction, fast-paced. If that's more your speed than like some really heavy nonfiction stuff. But we are working with Scott Santins, so
awesome.
Lots of interesting stuff this month.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. No, I was just looking it up on Audible, so I need to make sure to get that one. Yeah, I'm talking to Giselle.
It's free on SoundCloud. I don't know if I said that. Yeah. So you can get it on Audible, but you probably have to pay. But on SoundCloud, it is for free. Yeah.
I had like 5 credits that I haven't used, so I was like, I'll just
That's
use
wow.
it. But yes, I need
Yeah.
to make sure to get it. And
Universal basic Audible credits. Share the wealth, others.
hey, I shared one book with you.
I know, I'm joking.
I know, I was just kidding.
He already did it. It's very nice.
I'm trying to make her read more Harry Potter. That's a
I
whole
will
nother
support
discussion.
this.
See, yes.
I'm getting there, guys. Although, what a hell of a time to start reading Harry Potter when J.K. Rowling puts her foot in her mouth again.
Again. Yeah.
It's almost to the point like no.
Someone was like, can we just pretend Daniel Radcliffe wrote the books?
I like that idea, actually.
Or Emma Watson. I would probably choose Emma Watson, not gonna lie, but I'll take Daniel. He's cool.
Emma Watson's probably more accurate for someone
They
that
co-wrote.
Yeah.
They could.
All right. We're gonna start that.
He wrote the earlier ones. She wrote the more developed later ones.
Yeah.
I have thoughts. We could do a whole show on my thoughts on Harry Potter.
I was gonna say it makes complete sense. He wrote 1 and 2. They both wrote 3, and then she took it over from there.
Yeah.
No.
So we were talking about doing a Harry Potter thing just for the fun of it. After Meghin has read it, we should do it.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Let's do it.
And she has Wi-Fi to be able to talk about it.
I have Wi-Fi now.
Yeah.
It's all good. Well, thank y'all for joining me. We're just over an hour. Appreciate everything you do. Keep it up. Let me know how I can help y'all in the book club and everything. And yeah, we did all the plugs. Yang Gang Book Club. If you're not following them, do it. If you're not subscribed to them on YouTube, do that. They're almost at 1,000.
Oh yeah.
We're so close.
So close. So make sure to do that. And we will talk to y'all later.
Bye, guys.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.